Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. So I was perusing the Steam Workshop recently, just window shopping really, and came across an awesome map that I wanted to show you guys. If you've played scenarios before, there's probably been a few times you've scratched your head and wondered how'd they do that, and this map reveals a lot of those little scenario design tricks. It's by SpoOkyMagician, and you can subscribe to it and check it out for yourself. It seems to be getting updated regularly as people offer more suggestions, so by the time you see this, it might have even more than what I'm showing of it. I thought it would be of interest to you guys, not only for the people who might plan to actually make scenarios and use this stuff, but also for everybody else, because just seeing how some of these tricks work is really interesting in and of itself. So let's check them out. The first scenario trick is making water that units can walk across. The way you do this, maybe surprisingly, is by creating some bridges on land. You can then create a trigger, and one of the possible effects is remove object, and just designate the area and select buildings, or you can be specific to only remove bridges and no other buildings in the area. Anywhere bridges are removed is replaced by water that units can still walk on. Just be aware that the walkable water doesn't always look the same as regular water. The second trick is making a unit with a long red HP bar. I don't know why exactly you'd want to do that, but if you did, the way to do it is to damage the object with a very large negative number. It seems like it tries to subtract the negative number and correctly adds that amount, so their health goes way outside the normal HP limit. The third trick is about stacking buildings on top of each other. The best way to do this is to hold Ctrl and press S as if you're trying to save the scenario. If you do that once, you disable the snap to grid so you can place units more freely, and if you do it again, the buildings will look yellow and you'll be able to stack them on top of each other to create more interesting looking combo buildings. This also lets you put units in places that you normally can't put them, like trees on water or boats and fish on land. To get out of the stacking mode, you can press Ctrl+S again and it'll go back to normal with the snap to grid. You can accomplish a similar thing with the map copying option, and buildings can be pasted on top of each other, though you don't have as much ability to stack buildings when you do it this way. The fourth trick is getting Immortal Units. You'll notice they seem to have a negative value for their HP, but these units actually can't be damaged. It's done in a similar way to the long red bar trick of damaging with large negative values, except that you do it a few times, and the game seems to just stop keeping track after a while and makes your unit impervious to damage. The next trick is creating explosions. It might seem random, but the explosion is made with the use of a hawk. If you make a trigger that creates hawks and then destroys them, they leave behind a large explosion, because why wouldn't they? You want to make those part of the same trigger so that there isn't a delay between creating and destroying, but make the creation first in your trigger list, and then it'll immediately go to the next one, and you won't even have time to see the hawk. You'll just see the explosion afterward coming out of nowhere. Trick number 7 is invisible cliffs or invisible walls. Basically, you just drop down a cliff and then rotate it twice. The cliff is still there, but you won't be able to see it, and you can use that to make invisible walls in any direction or length that you want to, say to prevent a unit from going past a certain point. It's a pretty handy little trick. Number 8 is the opposite, and making cliffs that you can actually walk across. The way to do this is to make a row of buildings, like houses for instance, and then put the cliffs down below them afterward. You can then remove the houses with the trigger and you get the visual of the cliff intact, but the units can walk across it like it's open terrain. Number 9 is creating non-standard buildings like bridges and Tower of Flies. This one's pretty straightforward, and just under the effect of place foundation, you can select from more than just the normal buildings. Number 10 is how to make a clicking sound that you can use for a timer sound effect. You basically just need 2 repeating triggers, one of which changes the ownership of a piece of the True Cross to Gaia, and then another that changes it to the player who you want to hear the sound. You then loop them so that they deactivate themselves and activate the other every time, and you get a back and forth cycle. Number 11 is probably my favorite, and that's the silent tribute. Quite a few scenarios I've played give tributes, but you end up having to listen to the tribute sound constantly and deal with notifications on the left side flooding in. The secret is to put a negative value in the tribute and have the player you want to receive it actually sending that amount. For example, by sending -2 gold to Gaia, you gain 2 gold, but there's no notification sound or text. Number 12 isn't so much a trick as a cool fact about docks. Here it looks like the dock is just sitting in deep water where you can't normally place them. You can do this with the Ctrl+S trick, but what's cool is you can also place it with just a tiny bit of land and a tiny hint of shallow water as long as you arrange them correctly. Number 13 is a makeshift random number generator with a unit unloading on water between 4 points, having an apparently equal chance of being dropped off at any one of them. If the presence of the unit at a particular one of those spots causes something to happen, you could theoretically have a scenario with random outcomes or random starting conditions, which I think could be fun to incorporate for some extra replay value or variety. Number 14 is having hills with water on them. This one's really easy to do, and you just set the terrain fairly high and put water on it, and then lower the terrain in the middle. The physics of it doesn't quite work out, but it's certainly interesting to look at. And finally, number 15 is making an unwinnable game that never ends. There's probably lots of ways to do this, but one example would be to set a custom win condition of gathering a relic, and then put the relic somewhere inaccessible. So that's all of them here at the moment, but I get the sense this is really only just scratching the surface. For anyone interested in scenario designing, I'd recommend keeping an eye on this scenario for updates, or check out Age of Kings Heaven, where you can find more of this kind of stuff, as well as other tips about triggers and all of that. If you're looking for even more things you can do in your maps, I'd recommend looking into Trigger Studio, which is an open source program that people use to unlock more triggers than what you can normally see, like enabling or disabling text mid-game and attributing population space or kills to someone else. Plus, it lets you do things like copy triggers or duplicate one that you made to all players. So if you're really going heavy into scenario editing, there's certainly some cool things it seems to be able to do that I could see saving you a lot of time and really help bring your vision to life. That's all for this one though. I think it's awesome that we have people like SpoOkyMagician in the community doing stuff like this, especially for me as someone without a lot of experience with scenario designing. I thought these were really cool, and I hope you guys found it interesting as well. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.